In Death of Sasquatch Research Part 1, we discussed the inside forces of Sasquatch research. In Part 2, we discussed outside factions and how they affect Sasquatch research. Today, in Part 3, we will discuss the part that you, as an individual, might play in the whole scene. Remember, a sign of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. What if we decided to stop doing the same thing over and over? Let's see where that may get us. Our guest today is adverse to the ad hominem, ready to burn down the straw man before it makes an appeal to authority. He protects us from the slippery slope where bandwagons loaded with misinformed make their way as they appeal to ignorance. Of course, it would be a false dilemma to make hasty generalizations about this fellow, but I'll toss in a red herring and appeal to tradition as I introduce Bigfoot Okanagan's Leon Thompson. Let's get it on. This is West Coast Sasquatch Research. In progress. Whoa. Okay, I can edit that out. Yeah. Okay, recently I came across a situation where I had to ask, is skepticism criticism? Just because I don't believe an aspect of somebody's evidence doesn't mean that I do not believe that they are honest, that they are trustworthy, and that they are authentic. They could very well be all of those things. Do we need to learn how to communicate with each other better? Or just as importantly, listen to each other? So I got the perfect people with me to mull over this question and see what can be resolved. Bill Reed, how you doing, Bill?
Oh, not too bad. Yourself?
Good. And we got the Steenberger. How you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing fine, Jerry. Doing just fine.
Wonderful. And Leon the Man Thompson from Bigfoot Okanagan is here with us too. Hey, I welcome you all. So, why does the position of a skeptic usually come across as a negative stance to a misinformed individual? Can they not understand that it is the product of a scientific approach to that person's evidence and it's not a personal attack? You can jump on that one, Bill, and then I'd like to hear what Leon has to say.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. Part of it is people not understanding what skepticism is from the people that are telling their story or their event. But the other problem is a lot of people that claim to be skeptics are not skeptics. What they are is they have a belief system. They do not believe Sasquatch exists, and they're of the opinion, prove it to me, and they're not looking at it from a neutral position. So I think both sides, both some of the people claiming to be skeptics and some of those that get upset with skeptics, don't understand what the role of a skeptic or what skepticism actually means. And I think that's part of the problem. And if you go into places like Bigfoot forums, you can see the terms skeptic and skepticism misused on an everyday occurrence. And I think really what we need to do, people like us that are skeptics, is say what we're doing is we're sitting from a neutral position, examining each piece of evidence neutrally and letting the evidence dictate to us what our conclusion will be. not that we have a preconceived notion and we're looking at for confirmational bias. And I think that's the thing is we've got to it's like even the thing with critical thinking or the scientific method that, two more terms that get bandied about so often that people themselves that are using those terms either don't know what it means or they've twisted the meaning to suit their own worldview.
Do you agree with that, Leon?
Of course, I agree with that.
Oh, well, you see, go ahead.
I was just curious. When you asked us that question, do you have it written down?
I have many things written down.
Well, the reason why is you said it this very specific way, and the way you asked the question actually has, in my mind, the answer to your question. Because I don't, and probably you can't remember exactly how you worded it, so that's okay. That's why the reason why I asked you that. But yeah, I think that when we're talking to people and discussing things to people, the key part that gets confused is we're using the same word, but the person might have a different definition in their head to that word. So it's kind of like if we had a whole bunch of different people from different faiths and we got together and we talked about God. Well, we're all talking about God, but which God viewpoint are we discussing? So whatever my belief system is about what I think the word's actually meaning, that needs to be kind of peeked at first, just to make sure that we're actually talking about the same sort of thing. So again, just the word critical thinking, it's got the word critical in it, which goes into people's mind as something as a negative, and the same thing as a skeptic, which is usually holding from the general population is you just don't believe anything. That's how skeptical you are. You're so Nancy negative, kind of thing. And that's not what the healthy skeptic is, and nor is that what critical thinking is. It's a way of thinking that's very systematic, so that when you're looking at stuff, you stay objective in your positioning. In other words, inside of your mind and your feelings, you don't have any dog in the race, so you're just objective at collecting data. Most people, even though they'll say this kind of, I'm a skeptic or whatever like that, you talk to them for a little while and you ask them 3 really good questions, maybe 4 really good questions, and then whatever the foundation of their belief system is ends up getting starts fracturing for them. And that's when they move from the so-called objective position into the subjective. And how you always know when you're in the subjective positioning is you're emotionally starting to react. As soon as you start emotionally reacting, you have lost being able to have the capacity to be objective anymore. Because it moves to what Thomas has mentioned many times. It's a belief system that you're now agitating in the person. It's my belief about what I believe the topic is, Sasquatch, UFOs, any other crypto, any other topic. So yeah, totally. I think Bill's dead on that. I think all of us think the same way. So, I mean, we all know what we're talking about when we're saying these 4, as we're going to be talking about it. Definitions are all the same.
Yeah.
Because we understand what they are.
Leon, for people who don't really know who you are, and it's hard to believe there's people out there who don't know who you are, but could you give a thumbnail background on where you're coming from and what brought you into Sasquatch territory?
Fortunately, what brought me into it's the same thing I bumped into. So
where and how and when?
I deal a lot with systems. I educate people about systems, especially your own system, your family system, what you carry, and you're thinking why you carry what you believe. And one day I was just sitting in the office and I thought to myself, I need something to get me out of my head because I needed a break from it. And then all of a sudden, Sasquatch came into my brain and I giggled. Well, I didn't giggle, but I actually broke out laughing. I thought, oh, Sasquatch, that's interesting. And so I thought I could study what happens and film the process, document it, of what happens to someone who comes into the Bigfoot community or scene. And the second thing I could do is objectively look at the Bigfoot community as a system to see how it functions and works and what glitches might be. And that was back in almost 6 years ago, I guess, when I started that whole process. And in order to do that, whenever you study a system, I deal with cults too. So in order to go into a cult, you have to drink the Kool-Aid, but you take it kind of like poison of a snake. You take it in low increments so that you understand the belief system that's attached to the narration that's in the system. And so that's what I did. I went online. I thought, got to be objective about it. If I was looking for Sasquatch, where would I go? I go online. I hear what they say as evidence for Sasquatch. I look for all those things. I videotape the whole thing. I allow myself to be gullible. And so that gullibility comes through in my original videos, which I pulled off. I got about 30 of them. I'm going to use them as kind of a systematic documentary of what happens to people when they come into the system and the priming of the brain. And then what I found out was there's something really bad. Systems you can ask any question. There's no sacred cows like we would be doing normally if we were all sitting around. A closed system is you can ask certain questions, but you don't ask those questions. And that's where it becomes very subjective in regards to the belief system or the belief of the system. So probably about year 3, I started to really tune into what I think I was walking into. Reached out online, found this guy named Thomas Steenberg by seeing him in a few videos and stuff like that. Realized he was by mission, and I was all excited because he was going to help me figure out whether or not the mission Sasquatch sighting was legit, and because I was all keen to go, and I'd already checked it out online and looked it up on Google Maps, and so I reached out to Thomas, and we got together, and within 5 seconds, he basically told me what the backstory was, and my heart sunk down into the bowels of my bowels, which was good because a year and a half later, I got to talk to Justin from Mountain Beast Mysteries, and he was all keen to go. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said to him what Thomas had told me, and he did the same thing. His heart went from up to excitement to no, yes.
So Thomas is good at disappointing people.
Well, in a good way, I think.
In a good way.
He said to me,
he's awake. Yeah. He's awake.
yeah, he's not frozen. So when Thomas said to me, and I mean, I think he's pretty well nailed it, is the inmates have taken over the asylum. Now, you could just hear anyone who's listening to us right now that's just getting online is really keen and been drinking the Kool-Aid that they're going to be pissed right off at us to say such a thing. They're going to react to this whole well, how dare you? And what do you mean the inmates? What are you calling us crazy? No, we're calling you lack of education. And that's what we're actually here for, is to educate ourselves about upping the game so that we could track these things down. And instead of just listening to priming of the narrative of people with videos that we watch on a screen because we're excited and we have an open regulator because we're trusting, people need to ask people. If you're watching or you follow anybody on a channel, especially if they have high viewers, subscribers, that it's not a sign you know what they're talking about at all. Your brain likes patterns. It sees a high number. It gives validity. So you think that this has got some kind of credibility to it. So what you do at the end of videos is, especially if you've got a keen person you follow all the time, is ask this one question. Did this person show me at all why whatever he's showing me is evidence? It is a Sasquatch from his inside out, or all you're seeing is a finger pointing and a declaration that Sasquatch is Sasquatch, structures are Sasquatch, tree snaps are Sasquatch. You need to slow them down and ask them with buttercup, a fairy, and fudge cakes, and anything else you can in a nice tone. Could you please just explain to me how you see or can you explain to me why you think that's a Sasquatch from the inside out? And they won't have that data. That's wisdom. And it's like when it comes to tracks, a lot of people say I don't know how many tracks I've seen where people have sent to me, and they're not Sasquatch tracks, but we're looking for tracks and they're in a straight line. But yeah, that's nice. Do you know how to recognize a track? Do you know what you're looking for when looking at a track? And what you're looking for is not just the pattern of the track. You're looking for energy distribution of the force of a pad or hoof or whatever going into another solid material or liquid or muck or whatever like that, because that force will be different. You'll see a living energy in the track. And that was kind of a nice, deep way of explaining how to view a track. But many people don't look at it that way. They just see a track and it's double bear print or Sasquatch tracks in stone. They don't know how to edit or how to
figure out what's going on. Okay,
Got
Leon, I got this meme that you sent out, and no, it wasn't you, it was somebody else. Common logical fallacies. Number 6, that was you.
Yeah.
I'm no scientist. I'm no more a scientist than my dog is a cat. I'm an empty vessel. Fill me up, man. Number 6, appeal to ignorance. This is the only one that set me back. When it is said that an argument must be true if it cannot be proven false, or false if it cannot be proven true. Now, I thought to myself, hang on, because I figured I had something, some sort of understanding on how theory and experimentation and getting your evidence together and whatnot works. So I thought, how could I apply that? And so it came down to this. Schmuck number 1 and schmuck number 2 go into a bar, sit down, have a beer. Schmuck number 1 says, I believe that Sasquatch bury their dead. Schmuck number 2 says, I believe that Sasquatch do not bury their dead. To me, one of these statements can be made provable, but one cannot. And am I right or am I wrong? What do you think? Or does this fall into appeal to ignorance? I will tell you why if you wish that I think one could be.
Can I break you in there for a sec, Jerry?
Sure.
I think there's 2 real close arguments that get used quite a bit, is the appeal to ignorance, and it's often coupled with appeal to authority. Like, you'll often hear somebody say, I know because, and then try to show you that they have some authority on the subject, and then go into the appeal to ignorance. And this is an old ploy. If you look, and I've said it before, because this stuff all goes back to the philosophers of ancient Greece when they came up with with the critical thinking, or at least our Western version of it. But if you go back to the 60s, Eric von Däniken, when he wrote his books, Chariots of the Gods, Gold of the Gods, he was king of it. Yep. He would always end a sentence with, and science cannot explain it. So as soon as he used that phrase, and science cannot explain it, he's leading you down the garden path of whichever crazy theory he thinks it happens to be. And you see that in the Sasquatch world. And you also get, with that, guys that claim, I've been researching for 40 years, and I've had a habitation site for the last 20, and this is what I've seen. And they're now telling you that they have a level of knowledge or expertise that you don't have. And then they go into their argument. So I think when you're looking at, especially when you're looking at, critical thinking, you can get multiple different types of those arguments wound up into the same conversation, often used to bolster one another.
Okay, but I still wonder that as I said, I thought one of these statements could be made provable because you could apply evidence to it. Let's say
you can't prove it until you do the first step, which is prove Sasquatch exists.
Well.
or find a grave.
Well, if you're going to play that card, let's shut up shop right now. And
but that's what you're saying when you're going to prove something like that. Anything when people's making a statement about Sasquatch, you cannot prove or disprove until we've answered the first question. So any discussion we're going to have would be hypothetical at best.
Until question 1 is answered, every other question is a moot point.
100%. I'm just popping up my other laptop here, so which I had done.
That's
because you see me puppeting. I'm puppeting over here a lot, doing this kind of stuff.
You're weaving and dodging, and I was waiting for this glove to come in, boom, in the side of the head or something. Yeah. So Thomas, according to that, tell me, is there any purpose for an entity like Sasquatch World?
No.
I mean, if the question is number one and it hasn't been answered, what the hell are we all doing here?
Trying to answer question number one.
As I said to you before, answer question number one is like trying to find a smoking gun. We can't even find a gun, let alone if it's smoking
Wait, whoa, slow down. This is where it goes back to what we were talking about before in regards to make sure we're talking the same thing. When you're talking about the number one thing, we found the number one thing, in my opinion. That's tracks. Everything above that is speculation. That's the only thing.
I call everything above tracks is air. And that's all you got. It's fistfuls of air. Tracks are the only thing in this world that could possibly.
Even tracks are a question mark. Because after all, if the Sasquatch does not and never did exist, there has to be a different explanation for them.
But it doesn't matter. The tracks are all that's important. And all we're doing now is trying to figure out what makes those tracks. The rest is just fairy tale stories and everything else. Well, no faith in it whatsoever. But something is making those tracks. There's still $100,000 reward for anyone who can prove how these tracks are made that nobody has ever claimed. So that is what got me curious, and is still what makes me curious, is how the hell and why are these tracks in existence? I mean, it's not just someone playing a prank on someone when you find these tracks, as some of us have, many miles up into the woods, underneath a bush, like, what the hell?
But just stepping back a bit, Jerry, it doesn't matter. And again, we haven't found Sasquatch, but there has been numerous species where evidence of presence had led to their discovery. And that's what we do in the research. That goes beyond tracks. And this is where we try to differentiate between evidence of existence and fairy tales and other things. And we can only do so much. But when you look at tracks, what is often not thought of with tracks is tracks are a great method of disproving. And when I say that, Leon did the perfect example with the best Sasquatch tracks of 2020. There was a story that there was a track. Leon went there.
It's a whole new podcast.
Analyzed it and had conclusive proof through his, how he analyzed it, that it was a moose track. So, and this is where evidence, there's certain eyewitness accounts that we can say that person is credible, and we have no reason to disbelieve them. If a Sasquatch exists, they saw it. So from that, even though that evidence is hearsay, we can try to develop patterns. We can try to develop other criteria to aid us in our search for the existence of Sasquatch. The problem that we have as researchers is reading the signal from all the noise.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bet you if we took, even though the four of us have a very similar view on Sasquatch, I'll bet you if you were to deep down analyze each of our own criteria for analyzing evidence, we would all probably have slightly different approaches and even slightly different because of our worldview, because each of our own worldview is individual. We will have certain prejudice in how we review evidence, no matter how hard we try to be 100% neutral. I think at the end of the day, as researchers, we're trying to take the wheat from the chaff.
Well, but it always goes back to you're trying to prove yourself wrong. Yeah, really, you're literally trying to prove yourself wrong. You're not just saying what I just said. Well, you're going up there trying to prove yourself wrong. No, I'm not. I'm not going to tell the viewer that. But the bottom line is you are. And, that was why it was so hopeful for when you're hearing a clickbait from the person talking about where it's saying the best Sasquatch trackways of 2020. Now, listen, when Thomas came across, what sold him was when he came across those tracks. I can't remember, Thomas, where you said they were at.
Baldur's Creek, 1986.
Right. And then and imagine finding that type of trackway, but in snow. Because that type of trackway in snow is going to give you tons of environmental data that we would need about Sasquatch. Because we can easily track, or I won't say easily, have a higher capacity to track or follow those trackways, so we can find out where it bedded, why it bedded there. Lots of data we could have collected from that environment, but we haven't even done that yet. We just really need one really good snow trackway that we could track, because and even if they're covered in snow, as long as it's not too much snow and you can still see the indents, man, we could follow them for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Now, that ain't going to tell us any more about what Sasquatches look like or how they behave. Well, in a way, it'll tell us the behavior, but we're still going to be emptied. If I see a wolf hanging around my property here, I got a sow bear with 2 cubs roaming around. Well, great, I can follow its tracks and stuff, but it doesn't put me in the mind of a bear. I have to do more research of understanding of bear behavior. So to me, that's the thing that's so bloody frustrating, is this chronic, as Thomas had mentioned in the past too, is, Matt, you don't understand, every year, more dump trucks. So Bill, that's what you're talking about, is, and then it's recirculated, regurgitated dump trucks from 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and you're like, oh my God. I mean, it's such a waste of energy, time, and anybody who's trying to do anything, because online scene, unfortunately, is so saturated that, like you said, I was teaching one of the classes the other day, and I said to everybody, you guys remember how I was on, or asked to be on global national news? And they said, yeah. And I said, so let me do a scenario here. So-and-so over here, he can make a declaration that, hey, Leon, I'm not going to believe what happened to me this weekend. I saw a Sasquatch come through a portal. Aliens came down. 2 of them got out, came over and talked to him. And then he ended up cloaking and then went into the bush. Now, that's one statement. So I said to the class, that's one statement that he said. And it's going to take me 10 times the amount of energy for each of those 3 things: portal, UFOs, and Sasquatch. And you throw mind speak, any other thing you want in there. But it's going to take me 10 times the amount of energy to come up with a narration for a person to educate them of why those things are wrong if they bought into that belief system.
Well, exactly. I was talking to Nikki the other day, and we were talking about evidence and not believing evidence. And I said, but the thing is, Nikki, is that for every ounce of misinformation or bad evidence, it takes 15 pounds worth of effort to try to make up for it. 15 pounds of effort for every ounce of bullshit that's out there. And she agreed with me. And, what steps can be done to turn Sasquatch World around to make it worthy of some serious gravitas for, in the eyes of the public, or even in the eyes of the scientists? Well, what do you think has to be done to say, okay, whoa, horsey, time to turn you around and head back the trail the other way, kind of thing?
I think it's gone beyond that, quite frankly. And the general public, the inmates running the asylum, are basically dug in and they're entrenched, and their system of nonsense is just unable to be overcome by common sense research, because too many people are invested in that nonsense.
And and to go beyond that, I'll use an example that Thomas and I had a couple years ago. On one of Thomas's videos, a young guy commented. First off, he started off that he couldn't believe that Thomas was such a moron for being in this for 40 years without finding any Sasquatch evidence, because he was a city boy, didn't know anything about the woods, but using Google Earth, the first 4 times he went out looking for Sasquatch, 3 of those times he was able to find evidence of Sasquatch. And he was talking about stick structures and other nonsense. And then when we asked him, well, if you're somebody that has you're a city boy and you've claimed that you have absolutely zero bushcraft, how are you confident being out there? And he said, well, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, so I know what I'm doing. Well, at that point, I don't know if Thomas remembers that, but at that point in time, we basically just disengaged with that person because, again, we could try to talk to somebody when they first bring something forward, but there has to be a level of reasonableness there. Yep. And if you're talking to somebody that is already an expert in everything, then you're wasting your time, and your best bet is to just disengage and put your efforts where they belong. I mean, again, we talked about it before. Somebody's come after a friend of yours, such as, the Bluff Creek Massacre, and you want to, spend your energy defending people like John Green. I mean, that's all well and good. You're doing it for a personal reason. But when you get so many charlatans out there, if we tried going to every page or try to educate every person that was out there, they're not willing to listen. So you're going to waste your time. You have to focus your energy on the people that are willing to listen and willing to learn.
It's the same.
And the same with us. We have to be willing to listen and willing to
learn. What Bill just said there, Jerry. Todd Standing. I've had so many people tell me, do you have proof that Todd Standing faked this? Or do you have proof that Todd Standing? I've just disengaged. I said, I got better things to do than follow Todd Standing around. No. So I just disengage and go back to my own inquiries and research, and that's it. I mean, I'm not going to waste all my energy trying to disprove something I know is absolute horseshit. And if they want to believe it, go ahead. I mean, if you want to continue chasing your tails, go ahead. And there's just so many people in this nowadays that love that never-ending merry-go-round. Go ahead.
Even with that, Thomas, with Todd Standing, when somebody says Todd Standing, well, you can direct them to those 2 people that did the excellent study on the pictures to show that it was Todd Standing in a mask. They did the excellent on how that blinking is not a mammalian blink. It has to be animatronic. So you can, for somebody that says, well, can you prove? You can say, well, here's evidence that shows that those are animatronics and not real. If they choose to agree with that, that's fine. But there are people out there that in some cases have put out evidence, like with Bluff Creek. When all that nonsense with the Bluff Creek Massacre came out, you and Bill Miller invested the effort to show why that's nonsense. But just like other people have done that with Todd Standing. I mean,
and some people agree with us, but there's a hell of a lot of people that don't.
Yeah. So that's a pretty bleak picture you guys have painted, I must admit. For the newcomer, these podcasts are basically aimed towards the newcomers. And
I feel so sorry for the newcomer now. I feel absolute nothing but sympathy for a newcomer now who wants to get seriously involved in something like this, because there is so much garbage just dumped on your head. You just got to sort. Like Leon said, what I've said before about dump trucks. They literally land on the ground and 14 dump trucks dump all this stuff on your head. You've got to try to sift through all this nonsense. I personally personally, if I were to come into this research today, I'd probably just go around the back and blow my own brains out.
But, you know, building on that, Thomas, I think Leon, and I might be misquoting you here, Leon, so if I am, please correct me. But you've mentioned on some other podcasts I've seen where you talked about a lot of the younger people, and I think you're right in that most of the younger people are more discerning when it comes to this sort of stuff than the older generation like us.
I agree.
They've grown up
Yep.
with the internet, and they've grown up with the silliness that's out there. And I think that's what we can do is we can appeal to the discerning newcomers. And I think, again, Leon, you said we have to hit a high standard. And when we tell them something, don't say, I am telling you this because I've done this for 40 years. Give them valid reasons on why you believe your evidence is correct, valid reasons on why you come up with the theory that you had. And if they provide feedback by knocking down your argument and saying, hey, this, you know, have you thought about this? If they've put a well-reasoned argument into you, well, you owe it to them. If you're a true researcher, you owe it to them to consider it. And if they're right, or you believe they're right, move forward with that. And if you don't believe they're right, get into a healthy dialogue. But I think us old guys, you know, we may have more of an issue with the internet, but I think a lot of the younger people are way more savvy and have a higher BS filter than we give them credit for.
That's kind of true. I have done that in the past, and review this, review that. And I have problems finding it myself sometimes, even my own database. But they find it right away. I've had some people come up, geez, I never knew that. Yeah. And it does work, but you're never going to convince everybody. You're never, ever, ever going to convince everybody. Yeah.
You know, in this Sasquatch enthusiast business, it's the best thing about this I've found is that when you hit your 60s, you have no peers. So there's nobody that can impress you about anything. You can give the finger to all of them, you know. But for the newcomers, that's what these podcasts are all about, the newcomers, the research. To them, is it legitimate to worry about friends and family, what they think of you because you're involved in this, you know? If you were convinced that Sasquatch is real and you went around telling people this, would they now, you know, look at you as kind of gullible and, you know, you're not the serious person I thought you were to fall for this line of bull, you know? Do you think that's something that many younger researchers might trip across?
Well, there's a thing called the 18-40-60 rule. 18, you're worried about everything. At 18, you're worried about what everyone thinks of you. At 40, you don't give a shit what anyone's thinking about you. At 60, you realize no one's even thinking about you.
So sad, but so true.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the idea about when I got online to do this whole thing was to document what actually happens when somebody comes into a system like this. Because my channel, and you'll see it over and over again, is for the beginners.
Yep.
I have.
That's why I had to get you on this podcast.
I had an interesting thing just happen to me 2 days ago. And that was somebody on a Facebook page had posted my video called This is Disappointing Sasquatch Videos We Once Thought Were Real Turned Out to Be Not What We Thought They Were, or something like that. So anyways, he put it on there. He was an administrator for the Facebook page, and he said, this is a great video, you guys should check it out, all this kind of stuff. And then there was one guy who was also an administrator for that channel. He says, well, that was a waste of my 15 minutes. And then he proceeded to do this whole novel about, you know, if you don't believe in Sasquatch, why do this kind of stuff? You're just promoting the hoaxers and all that. Like, and they went on. Now, I know this guy really well, and I really respect this guy. And I was testing the waters because, like, sometimes, and you guys have been online, where people have left you stuff where you just want to say something and slice, dice, and julienne fry the person who has no idea what you're doing, right? They're projecting onto you all these other people that they've come across, and they, for some reason, think that they hear the same words, but they don't realize the person who's now they're watching is coming at it from a totally different angle, but they can't recognize that. So what ended up happening is that we went. I read it at 11 o'clock at night when I was just done a shift. So I was driving 45 minutes home, and my mind just kept ruminating over how I should respond to this. And I thought, how did I word it? I said something like, "Have you ever had this style of occupation or whatever?" And the guy who had originally posted said, "Leon, you know he has." And I said, and then so he comes back with this long statement again. And I said to him, instead of talking about where he was at, because he was, again, subjective, I could tell by the tone and the writing that was in there. And I said to him, could you tell me so-and-so what you believe my motivation was for doing that video? And he says, well, Leon, I don't know what your motivation is. Well, apparently he must, because he wouldn't have wrote a novel of all the ideas of what his perception was about what this video was about, when it wasn't about that at all. So I thought about it for another 12 hours. And then the second thing I wrote back to him was I think a lot of times so-and-so people forget that my channels are for the beginners. And the reason why I did that video up was because some of those videos were circulated and have been circulated for over 10 years. And I don't want my viewers, if they're new to come on, they'll see my video and they'll say, oh, that's what the video Leon was talking about. And it's all vetted, this kind of stuff. The second administrator came back, said, Leon, fair enough. I had a burr under my butt because I thought you were coming from another approach. I'm so sorry I did that for you. I still think you're an incredible researcher. I don't like using the word researcher. We're looking for truth. Get the word researcher out of your mouth. Put the word truth there. That helps with the conversations you're having with people. And then I had a second guy apply or respond. Again, this is all bullshit. This guy's a liar and a charlatan. The administration automatically jumps on and says, you don't even know this guy. Who are you to say this about this guy? How do you know that this guy's a liar and charlatan? I can guarantee you that Leon is not blah, 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 blah. So this guy comes in with a whole, again, narration novel. He's got written down about all of the stuff. And again, it's the same thing that was regurgitated a little bit up top, which was about, hoaxers and all this kind of stuff. And this doesn't do anything for the community and all that. And then I said, well, let's test your own character to see, and your capability. In those videos, there's one video of an eagle cam from one of the states, and below it, supposed Sasquatch walkthrough. Go research that video and find out what the name of the guy that's actually in that video. And then I said, it is a person. So he comes back, he says, well, I'm from Wisconsin, and I've been living here for 50 years. This is kind of important to hear this for people who are listening and watching. And I've been in this area for 50 years, and my grandmother found an 18-foot track. Now, this is what's called deflection. Mm-hmm. Because he's not doing what I asked him to do. And I said, well, and once you've done that video, go and do all the other videos. And I would hope that you'd have the character to come back and do an apology. Because if you don't do that, then those two definitions, liar and charlatan, are going to be applying to you because you accused me. You said to me I was a liar, which makes you a liar if you're wrong. And you're a charlatan if you don't do what I asked you to do. So he comes back with this whole long thing again. So my next response to him is going to be, it's incredible. If you've been in that area in Wisconsin for 50 years, this is where the state cam's at. Surely you should be able to find it faster than I would find it. Do you think, and he's totally missing it, and this is what you're looking for, like when I study systems and I'm looking at that dialogue of that narration, the guy's thought process, how he's negotiating it, he doesn't want to do what the main problem in the Bigfoot community is. Investigate. Don't make an accusation about somebody you don't know and call him a liar and a charlatan. Go and check to see whether or not, first of all, the guy is even telling the truth about it. You have to do that. But again, that's at 10 times the amount of effort it's going to take him to do it. He wouldn't even do it for the most easiest one in his own state. And he's still, going on about, like you were saying, Bill, I've been doing this for 50 years and blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking, yeah, you remind me of a guy I had working for me. He was doing it for 10 years, the same mistakes. He's just been doing them for 10 years.
I had a guy on Bigfoot forums that pulled that one on me. And he said, I don't know if you get out in the woods at all, but I get out in the woods 5 times a day for at least 4 hours a day.
Nice one, Bill. Totally.
I thought he was supposed to have the last word, not you. I got the last word. Good night, guys. Thank you very much.